This is Tennessee Talks with United States Congressman Tim Burchett.
Hello, I'm Congressman Tim Burchett, and welcome back to Tennessee Talks. I'm very glad to be joined today for this episode by Ambassador Hsiao Bi-khim. Did I get that right, Ambassador?
Yes, very good.
Pretty close. All right. You know, you've been Taiwan's ambassador to the United States since July of 2020. Is that correct?
Yes.
Great. And before taking on her current role, she served 4 terms in the Taiwan legislature and was a senior advisor to Taiwan's president. Every day, Ambassador Hsiao is working on strengthening our two countries' relationships, and I'm extremely supportive of the work she does on behalf of our allies in Taiwan. Ambassador Hsiao, thank you so much for joining Tennessee Talks. It's great to have you on the show.
Thank you, Congressman. I'm delighted to be here, and I thank you for the opportunity to introduce Taiwan to your listeners and to the people of Tennessee.
Yes, ma'am. Well, thank you. We've had a good relationship with y'all, and we love that. And if I can go on, get into our questions, and I want to say thank you too. You're always a gracious host when I've been by to visit, and you're wonderful, and you're very well thought of up here. So thank you so much, ma'am.
Well, thank you again for these opportunities to engage and to work together to strengthen our relationship.
Yes, ma'am. Now, when I say something, it's going to be from East Tennessee. So if I need to slow down or get you a translation, you just let me know, okay? And but in my opinion, Vladimir Putin I think he's a thug. I think he's still waging an unprovoked war against Ukraine, and the outcome of this war has major implications, I think, especially in Taiwan, for Taiwan. And we know the Chinese Communist Party is closely watching what's going on in Ukraine with regards to its aggressions towards Taiwan. I wonder, how are the folks in Taiwan feeling about the conflict between Ukraine and Russia?
Well, we are following the conflict closely. The brutality and the humanitarian suffering has deeply touched the sympathies of the people of Taiwan. Though historically, we are very different from Ukraine, and our geopolitical circumstances are different. But I think we have one thing in common, and that is the people of Taiwan and Ukraine live next to an aggressive authoritarian neighbor that has been bullying and threatening our nascent democracies. The people of Taiwan have worked for decades, some people sacrificing their lives to fight for democracy and the freedom that we enjoy today. We cherish our freedom, and as we are watching the conflict, we feel that we are not a bystander. And that is, we feel obligated to be supportive of the people of Ukraine. And that is why Taiwan also joined the sanctions led by the United States and other democracies against Russia. And we are also providing humanitarian support to the people and the refugees of Ukraine.
Right. You pretty much answered my follow-up on that. I was curious about why would it be successful for Ukraine be involved in it's important to y'all that Ukraine remains free from Russia just as much as you all need to be free from communist China. So I guess you pretty much answered that. But in the days leading up to Russia's invasion, to the Russian invasion, President Biden shared critical U.S. intelligence with China's Xi Jinping, and President Xi then betrayed our trust, and of course he gave that intelligence to Vladimir Putin. And this was a really bad look for our country. Should the United States be a little more cautious in our interactions with the Chinese Communist Party?
Well, I think the United States gave China a chance to do the right thing. As a global power, and the U.S. gave China the opportunity to be responsible, to use its leverage to try to stop this humanitarian disaster, to stop the conflict. But China did not use that information in a way that reflects its global power and standing. And I think this chance was given. And in regards to sharing information with China, I think it's important to share information to the extent that that information is strategically important in achieving certain goals. And I think China has been given the chance, and China's inability or refusal to act responsibly, and actually to the contrary, China demonstrating sympathies towards Russia and instead accusing NATO and the United States and Ukraine of provoking this, I think demonstrates that China is not reliable, that we have to be much more vigilant about the Communist Party of China. We have to be we have to work harder towards responding to the possibility that China might also follow the footsteps of their longtime friend and ally, Russia.
That's why you're a diplomat, ma'am, and I'm not. you handle that very well. What do you think the latest is on the Chinese Communist Party's hostile behavior towards Taiwan, and what is Taiwan doing to deter Communist China, and how can the U.S. help Taiwan in this regard?
Well, China has been threatening Taiwan for decades. These threats have intensified ever since Taiwan started to turn towards democracy. We had our very first presidential election in 1996, so we are a young democracy, but for the first time we were electing our own leader. And China responded by firing missiles towards Taiwan. We're grateful for the United States at the time for demonstrating a U.S. commitment to Taiwan's peaceful evolution towards a democracy. Since then, we have been working hard to fortify our democracy, and in light of the continuing threats and China's increasing capacity to operationalize those threats in a military way, Taiwan has also increased our own investments in our self-defense. We thank the United States and our friends in Congress like you who have continued to support the policy of strengthening Taiwan's self-defense. We have relied heavily on the United States for selling us arms and for supporting our evolution in our own technologies as we develop our own defense systems as well in countering these growing threats. We have to admit, though, that we are in a precarious situation where China is growing in its aggressiveness and its strength, and we are in an asymmetric situation, and that is we are in no position to engage in an arms race with China. So we have to be strategic, we have to be tactical, we have to target asymmetric capabilities that will deter the Chinese from taking action. Our ultimate goal is to prevent an invasion or attack from ever happening. And so we want to work with you, the United States, as well as other responsible stakeholders in the region in ensuring that peace and stability will prevail, that freedom and democracy will also prevail in our region.
Okay, great. Let's switch gears a little bit. I want to talk a little about your all's response to the coronavirus pandemic. Your country was one of the earliest success stories in shutting down the virus. What do you think made Taiwan so successful in that endeavor?
Well, we try to learn from the past, and in 2003, we suffered from a SARS pandemic that also came from China. And since then, we had been carefully monitoring emerging epidemics and the public health situation in China. Having the advantage of speaking and understanding the Chinese language, our experts detected some conversations among Chinese medical professionals and also tried to alert the World Health Organization at an early stage of COVID-19's evolution. Unfortunately, the WHO has continued to exclude Taiwan from participating and from having a formal role in working with the global health community in countering global health crises. And so we started, at least on Taiwan's part, early in preventing this. From all the lessons we learned from SARS in 2003, we knew we had to increase our production and stockpile of PPEs. We knew we had to quarantine Chinese travelers at an early stage. We did all of this. We also tried to share our efforts and to alert the rest of the world on what was happening. We managed to keep COVID pretty much out of Taiwan until recently, and we now have a surge in new COVID cases in Taiwan, but we're trying to learn to deal with the pandemic in a way that is open, that's democratic, that has the participation and information transparency, information sharing involving our public that is working with the government together in combating COVID-19. We also try to play a constructive role on a global level, and we thank you and your colleagues in Congress for passing a unanimous resolution in Congress supporting Taiwan's observership in the World Health Organization too.
Yeah, I remember the World Health Organization obstructed Taiwan from helping the global community, of course, during the pandemic. And why do you think ultimately the World Health Organization was opposing Taiwan? Was it connections to China or the communists, or what was it?
Well, it's an unfortunate reality that China has skillfully utilized its global leverage to marginalize and isolate Taiwan, to block Taiwan's international participation. And this is not only a problem with the World Health Organization, it is also a problem with other international institutions like the United Nations and Interpol. Taiwan is blocked from playing a constructive role in working with others to stop global crime. We are also blocked from the International Civil Aviation Organization. And you know, given the importance of inclusion, I mean, you know, whether it is working on global health or working on civil aviation safety, these are organizations where inclusiveness is critical to working together. We can, you know, imagine that leaving certain parts of the world community out of these global institutions will have detrimental consequences on global health, as well as the health and safety of others around the world. And so, again, you know, China's influence, and I want to call it malign influence, because they are trying to introduce language like Xi Jinping thought into the United Nations. They are trying to lobby others in the United Nations to go by Chinese human rights standards, Chinese developmental standards. And as a democracy, as a freedom-loving society, the Taiwanese people really want to stand with other democracies in countering such malign influence. And it is unfortunate that China continues to have the upper hand in marginalizing and isolating Taiwan. And on this point, again, I want to thank you and your colleagues in Congress for speaking up on this injustice and on highlighting the importance of keeping the global community inclusive of democracies like Taiwan.
Thank you, ma'am. I guess we'll close it out here, but we always allow folks, they want to ask me a question or take a shot at me. This is the time they do it. Do you have any questions you'd like to ask me?
Well, you know, I think a lot of Taiwanese people are eager to deepen the partnership with the United States. Our economic and trade relationship is actually relevant to all American people. And Taiwan plays a critical role in the supply chain. And so I think my question to you is, what is your assessment on the American people's attitude towards deepening trade and developing trade agreements with other democracies like Taiwan as we work together in fortifying those supply chains around the world?
I think it's incredibly strong, but I always say the American public, and I'm guilty of this too, we want our pizzas in 30 minutes or less, and that's about our attention span, and we're going to drive across town to save a nickel. And what we need to do is start focusing on our friends and exposing our enemies for what they really are, and put the U.S. economic might behind that, and just quit buying things from our enemies or people that want to destroy us. The Chinese communists, they've put these institutes all over the country in our houses of education, basically just to infiltrate and indoctrinate our kids. And we kicked them out of a lot of them, but they just scatter. And I think we need to educate the public much better. And and we need to start doing it in our schools, in our public schools, and in our town squares, and start talking about the Uyghurs and people like that who are slave labor that are making things that we have to have. And through the Chinese Communist Belt and Road Initiative, they go into these smaller countries or larger countries, and they figure out a need they have, and they isolate it, and then they bankrupt the country, and then they basically bring their people in and take it over. It's I'm sure there's a lot more scientific analogy of that than that, but that's basically what they do, and it's a takeover. And we've got to be better as a country. We've got to educate our folks. So I for one, my father, I always tell this, my mama, she flew an airplane during the Second World War. She lost a brother fighting the Nazis, but Daddy fought the Japanese all the way across the Pacific, and then went to China after the war and fought the communists there. And he saw the true free Chinese folks. And I think that was till he went to his grave. That was one of his greatest regrets, is that we turned our back on our friends, and the world is suffering for it now. Hey, my lights just went out. There it goes. A light sensor there. Some cost saving stuff by the federal government right there. But no kidding aside, we need to educate our folks and let them know. And I think if we do that, at some point, America will turn and say we understand the supply chain thing, and a lot of it has to do with us doing business with people that aren't friendly to our country and are not good people, and we need to punish them for that. So anyway, I guess that's a long answer. I apologize, Ambassador. I should have given you a better, more concise answer, but it's not one I could just put in a little sound blip. But Ambassador, I want to thank you so much for your valuable time today. It's I always love when we interchange ideas and things, and you've been great about coming to us and allow us to come to you and talk about things. And your position always has allowed us to get valuable insight in some of these crucial events that have been happening around the world. And I appreciate you sharing those events with me and my listeners today. And I'm Congressman Tim Burchett, and I want to thank you all for listening to this episode of Tennessee Talks.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Tennessee Talks. Please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Keep up with Congressman Burchett by following @Rep Tim Burchett on Twitter and Instagram, and @Congressman Tim Burchett on Facebook and YouTube.